when I first started out as a manager, I wasn't that good at leading. I was very good at like getting stuff done, very good at supporting my team, but I don't think that I was as empathetic as I am now. Later on in my career, I walked into one team. They were very much like you'd sit in the group meetings and everybody would be very quiet. They didn't feel comfortable. Anytime you step into a team, it takes time to take that transition. You have to build that trust, and that if I was vulnerable, that it was easier for them to be vulnerable. And so there was this shift. It was, hey, I have an idea. I want to do this, or I think we could improve on this. And let's add this to we actually had a list of things of what can we do to improve the team and what can we do to improve the process. They were starting to empower themselves to take control. And so they really, really transformed into this high performing team. And so rewarding.
For our listeners, I have the secret. You gotta hide a horse from your husband. Uh, so you can ask me later. But DM me. Or DM Melissa because Melissa has the secret really.
Not the one who did it. DM my mom.
Yeah. We're both equestrians, and you have a long history of being in the equestrian space. You have an also long history of being a leader and a mentor, and you've managed teams, you've worked with teams. And one of your posts really stuck out to me, Melissa, about are you leading your team or are you just managing the work and their to-do list? And how it resonated with me because how easy is it to get caught up in the to-dos and the sort of monotonous tasks in our daily work and forget that we're responsible for painting the vision for people too. But I want to hear your thoughts, and maybe we should begin with what your background is and what has brought you into the leadership space too.
Yeah, I mean, my background's a little interesting in the sense that I actually started in science. I was in grad school going, hey, these chemicals are going to kill me. So what am I doing? So I was all but dissertation for that. And I was like, this isn't good. So I left with my master's, got a job as a research scientist, took a year off from school because I'd already been in school a long time. And then went back to school at night for my MBA. And when I finished that, I moved into project management and I built subway cars in project management. So $1 billion contracts for looking at New York City subway cars, building those and building DC subway cars. And then from there, I made everything so efficient that I actually walked around and said, what else can I do to help? Because I turned my job into a 10 to 20 hour a week job. And so they started giving me change orders and subcontracts and all that kind of stuff. And so I was just part of a team there. Then I moved to another company where I built the LA Metro subway cars. And I had started, working with my own team and having reports and building from there before moving into another company where I had more teams as well. So each progressive thing had an increase of promotions and responsibility and more people to mentor and manage and lead.
I love that. How cool that the work that you were doing, you were literally helping people connect from one physical location to another just by being involved in building those cars and helping with that infrastructure. And most people wouldn't necessarily look for more work. Once you make your job efficient, you might be like sitting back and thinking, okay, cool. What can I do for myself? But you were actually looking to help other people and to help other people grow. And I can see that just in the way you interact with others online, the way that you offered your time to me for us to connect and get to know each other. And so that's definitely a characteristic and a quality that you've shown and something that, hopefully all of our leaders can demonstrate an example too. It takes some time to get to that leadership role, and you talk about some of the challenges in helping to develop a team and helping them get beyond the management of the daily tasks. And I'm curious, what are some of the epiphanies or the growth lessons that you learned along the way when it comes to leading people and helping them do their job efficiently and effectively?
All throughout my career, doesn't matter whether I was a leader at the time or just a team member, anytime I saw something where somebody's like, "I don't understand it," I would take time, whether it's, like, literally drawing on a whiteboard, some example. I mean, I can remember back to the Kawasaki days at the rail car and just literally drawing somebody's like, "I don't understand why the seasons are reversed in the Southern Hemisphere," and I'm drawing the globe and the moon and the sun and, like, showing things like that. Like, those types of things I just have always been, that kind of teacher kind of, share my knowledge kinda thing, and, in grad school, I was a TA and I was a tutor all throughout a lot of my educational career, and even, a couple years ago, I was still tutoring kids in chemistry in high school. So it's kinda just really ingrained in who I am. And when I first started out as a manager, and I'll be honest, I wasn't that good at leading. I was very good at, like, getting stuff done, very good at supporting my team, so if we had tasks that were too big for the team, I would step in and make sure it was done. Because to me, we either succeed as a team or we fail as a team, and so, like, nobody should be spending more hours getting stuff done if it's too much than I would do, and I would just step in and be efficient and try to teach them. I would hold sessions, people starting to look at contracts and trying to understand the clauses. And I would hold sessions with my team. Let's walk through each one of these clauses and make sure that you understand what each one means and what it means legally and for the business and what it means and how to try to negotiate that and where the pitfalls are and where the go, no go deal breakers are and what you can and cannot give on. And so I spent hours sitting in my office with my team going it one by one, we're going through this to make sure that they understand. But, like, earlier in my career, I didn't quite understand what it meant to lead, and I can honestly say that now because, like, it was a struggle at the beginning, not so much from a standpoint of I wasn't supporting them, but I don't think that I was as empathetic as I am now, from a standpoint of, like, getting them to understand why and getting them to bring themselves up, and I think it was a harder scenario. So, later on in my career, I walked into one team. They were very much like you'd sit in the group meetings and everybody would be very quiet. They would barely say anything. It was very clear that they didn't feel comfortable talking for themselves. And it was just a very weird vibe. Anytime you step into a team, it takes time to take that transition. You have to build that trust first because they're not going to just open up, right? So it was, each person goes at their own rate, each person goes at their own speed. So working within the team, spending that time one on one with each one of them and making sure that it was a weekly one on one and sharing things about myself and sharing things about my struggle and my thoughts and what I wanted to improve and grow just to get them to understand it was a safe space and that if I was vulnerable that it was easier for them to be vulnerable and if I was transparent it was easier for them to be transparent. And so there was this shift in the team and you could see it in the very visibly in the group meetings because it went from nobody had anything to say, they wanted to get off, they didn't really chit-chat at the beginning, to, "Gosh, we have to kinda cut off the chit-chat and now focus on the work." But also during the work like, during the times where you're doing the work, it was, "Hey, I have an idea. I wanna do this," or, "I think we could improve on this, and let's add this to our" we actually had a list of things of what can we do to improve the team and what can we do to improve the process. And it went from this, like, task-oriented, downtrodden feel to they were starting to empower themselves to take control and take ownership of their sections of their work. They were opening up and happy and laughing and support and, like, they always supported each other. That team was just one of those that always stood by and said, "Okay, if you need help, I'm gonna help you." But it didn't feel cohesive, and they didn't feel empowered, and they didn't feel safe to speak up, and that performance went from okay, we're just task oriented. We don't think anything beyond that to, hey, here's an idea. I looked at this. This doesn't seem right. I'm bringing it to you. What do we do about this? And how do we fix it? And so, like, they really, really transformed into this high performing team. And it was incredible to watch because to see them go from that point to the high performing point, so rewarding and just great experience.
That is so cool that you got to see that transformation. And this was a team that you inherited, right? So you are inheriting this team from somebody else. I don't want to assume that the person before them caused some of that. Maybe it was fear or hesitation in speaking up, but I certainly know what it's like to be in those situations where the leader, the boss, the supervisor, whomever is not creating an environment where voices are heard and acknowledged, or you feel like if you aren't couching what you say and tactful enough, that it will be misunderstood or misconstrued. And you were going into this environment where people were feeling a certain way about speaking up, and you changed that. You, in your words, you flipped it and you were able to have that incredible transformation. And part of me is curious, do you feel like it was a psychological safety challenge that you had to then help develop that feeling of safety and security with the team?
I do. I think it really came down to they had to feel that they trusted me. They had to feel like their ideas mattered and were valued because they definitely didn't feel valued. There was no part of that team that when I talked to them about, well, how are you feeling about things? Do you feel like you're valued? The answer was flat out no. They didn't feel valued. So to get to that point, so the first thing you have to do is build that trust because if they don't trust, they're never going to open up to you. No matter what you try to do, they're not going to believe it's from the right source of things. And so from that point, you can then take it into the other parts of like, okay, now I'm teaching them other things and developing them into a new level of their role because now they feel like, hey, like this is for the betterment of my good, right? So for my career and my role, I can now take it over and don't feel afraid to step up and do that. And it's interesting, like you could see it in the elements of different pieces of the work. So, like, let's go with just documentation, right? So they're like, why do we have to do documentation? But after you build this trust, they're like, man, this documentation is great because I've got something to refer to and I've got something to work with. And oh my gosh, I want to do my own. And so, like, you could see it in just these other pieces where you're taking them from that. Okay, I just do my task. I don't think beyond it. To hey, these are great things. What else can we do?
Well, the other thing, I feel like you're describing, it's not just the psychological safety, but you're also empowering people. You use the word or phrase just now, think beyond. You're empowering them to push beyond their limits. And they could have been in a situation where it was status quo, they were being boxed in, and they felt like they couldn't move beyond that too. And that can be very powerful as a leader to help other people realize that they have greater potential than what even they might feel they have.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, one of the things I've always kind of it's a little funny, but in the sense of I actually say, how can I make myself obsolete? I mean, like, really? As a leader with your team, I mean, like, you
Yeah,
never truly become obsolete because you're there to support, you're there to remove roadblocks, right?
yeah.
But, like, from a knowledge base, from a development base, from, like, ideas, you wanna make yourself obsolete. Your goal should be to make yourself obsolete, right? Give all your knowledge to your team, empower them to do their roles, be there to remove the roadblocks so that they can do what they're supposed to do and want to do and make it something that they enjoy. So, yeah, it's just kind of funny.
I'm laughing because I have said the literally the exact same thing, and my team is like, "I wanna make myself obsolete." But to your point, you're right. There's always going to be they're gonna need us for something, not that they can't do their job without us. For me, it's about making sure that I'm not a roadblock for them. But I like what you're sharing about roadblocks, and you said that you had helped remove roadblocks for the team. So I'm curious, what did you find was maybe, a hesitation in bringing roadblocks to you, or where did they typically get stuck on that you found you needed to jump in or could jump in and help?
Yeah, I mean, like, every team's different. So, some teams, their roadblocks are just simply knowledge, right? So, hey, we've hit the wall of what we know. I don't know what to take it beyond this. So whether it's, that technical expertise or that specific clause in the contract, or maybe it's something to do with taxes, or whatever it is along the way, they just have hit that border of their knowledge, right? And some of it is just confidence, right? So if you're newer in your career, you don't have the confidence that you actually know what you're talking about. So I've had a lot of people come in and be like, "I think this is what it is, but I really don't believe myself." And I'm like, "No, you've got it. You've got it. You know what you're talking about. You really do like believe in yourself." I've had quite a few team members throughout the years that the biggest problem I've had with them is them believing in themselves. And of course there's always politics within the businesses or other things that you have to get through or you have to coordinate with another leader. And so, that's not something that they need to do. That's something that needs to raise up to me in terms of roadblocks. But, the most common one is either knowledge development or just belief in themselves. And, like I'm a firm believer in really working on that confidence and being a cheerleader for that person.
Well, I love that for 2 reasons. 1, you're the first person that I've had as a guest to acknowledge that knowledge can be a roadblock or lack of can be a roadblock, and that's to me speaks to the importance of developing yourself and being in that growth mindset, that learning mindset constantly, whatever your role is. And then the other part to that too, that idea you're explaining of helping people realize the imposter syndrome is perhaps normal for most of us, but we have to build that self-confidence. And I'm thinking back, I recorded an episode with someone who shared how having someone in your corner believing in you is so important. And at the same time, I feel like it's almost more important to have that self-confidence in you that you do have the potential no matter who is in your corner cheerleading you on, because it's our own self-doubt that can really stall progress. And I don't know if you disagree with that or if that kind of aligns with what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that for sure because look, without somebody in your corner, it's hard, right? So like we sit there, it doesn't matter who you are, whether you're early in your career or you're late in your career. If you're sitting in a management committee meeting and you've got people surrounding you who are not listening to you and don't take your word for being valuable, like they don't lift you up, it's a fight. It's exhausting. So it doesn't matter where you are, having somebody that is there backing you and you know that you're not losing your mind when you say something, I think is such a big part of feeling safe and feeling comfortable. And you don't have to agree with everybody. That's not the point. The point is you have to feel like you're valued in that. And so like when you don't believe in yourself and you don't have that, or even if you do have that, you are the first line of everything. So, like, when I was younger, I definitely had self-esteem issues. Like, I knew my academics were really good, but, I was a shy kid. I don't know. Nobody can see it now because I like talk a mile a minute. But, like it was tough. But like at some point in my life, I had to just decide that didn't matter. I had to believe in myself. And it was a process through that. And so, sometimes I get called out for, sounding a little arrogant or whatever, but it's because you build that up and you kind of come across and be like, no, I really do know what I'm talking about. And then there's that balance between talking softly and talking like I know what I'm doing. And I think that, I think women have to struggle with that a little bit more than men, but like it's still a balance and you still have to know your audience and you have to know what's in there, but you still have to believe in yourself because if you come out and whatever it is you say, whether it's right, wrong, indifferent, and somebody knocks you down, if you don't believe that you have the right to be there because you've earned it and you know it. Um, you're just gonna walk out of the room and just call it a day.
Well, I like that approach because you're leaving room for different ideas. And just because you have confidence doesn't mean that you always have to be correct, right? It's not about always being right, but to your point, it's giving the space for everybody to share confidently and not feel like they're less than in a room of peers or otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. It should be an inclusive environment where everybody has the freedom to, say their voice and say their opinion. whatever the dynamic is how decisions are made or how the team operates, but everybody should have that voice, and internally, you have to have that confidence to speak up, because if you've ever sat in a meeting room, which I'm sure you have, where there's people sitting in the corner saying absolutely nothing, and, some of it is they just have nothing to add, and some of it is they don't feel they can add, because they don't have that confidence, and if you're on a team, your voice matters.
Oh, yeah. Firsthand know. I remember being in situations where you almost knew, like, when you had to speak in a meeting too, when it was your turn, and practicing in my head, like, what I'm going to say so that I don't sound stupid or dumb in front of all these people. And, hindsight being 2020, you kinda realize I realize at least how much, anxiety I put on that when it was the least important thing that I needed to worry about, but also recognizing that it wasn't coming from just me, it was coming from the environment that we were all in, and I know I wasn't alone in feeling, put on the spot and feeling a little bit of anxiety speaking up because of the kind of environment that we were working and engaging in, and, so your situation and thinking about my own, how important is it to have someone that acknowledges your voice and what you have to share. But then you also mentioned, Melissa, the idea of challenging thoughts and ideas. So there could be some anxiety around that too. But if we do want to do that, how do we make sure that we're respectful and at the same time we really are challenging in a healthy way, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to ideas. Like you debate ideas with data. You debate ideas with, thoughts, and instead of saying, "Well, you should do it this way," right? And you go, "Well, have you thought about this?" It's the posing of a question. It's, really coming down to, well, here are the elements of it. If we break apart it into a logical step, like here's the pieces that we're thinking about. They I've definitely had people in my career that no matter what I did, it didn't matter and it was a fight. Oh man, I've had some of those. But I had a lot of really good people throughout my career who also were like, okay, let's bring it together and let's talk about the data. I mean, I think if you keep it professional, you're not attacking someone. You're looking at the idea and you're breaking the idea apart and saying, "Well, here's a comparison from something else. Here's a step that we're missing. Hey, have you considered that this is a bottleneck here? We need to consider something different." It's really just breaking it down into process and data, I think is the easiest thing. And then, just kind of talking about what are the results you wanna do? So, like, if you have a goal in there, it's a lot easier to break something down to try to meet that goal than, just focusing on a high level idea that doesn't really have a path.
Mm. Well, I'm so glad you shared that understanding that it isn't the person we're not tearing down each other when we challenge an idea or a thought or an option, and I'm appreciative of you bringing up the thoughts around process, and, uh, it makes me think of an interview with Mark Vincent that in which we talked about that idea of examining the process because he consults on process, and his point is very much the same, similar to yours, where it's an understanding that I don't know everything, and I don't even know what the problem might be. We're all here to figure it out together, and I'm gonna ask questions to get to it, and we will be agile and adapt to whatever the solution might need to be. And I see a lot of similarities in that in what you're saying because we're here to do a job. We're here to find a solution, right? And it's not about us. And it's easier said than done, but that's where my thoughts are. I don't know if anything there resonates with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think everything's about being adaptive and agile. I mean, like, I guess agile's kind of a little bit of a word that's going out of style just from a standpoint of agile project management. So that was just a little funny thought in my head. But no, to your point, like it is about solving a problem. And if you focus on the problem and not focus on who's speaking, but focus on the problem, what is the problem? I guarantee you that if everybody is focused on the problem, you're going to get a much better solution and you're going to get much better ideas than if people are focused on winning. I mean, that's about the worst thing you can do in a, in a group, in a team, in a company is who's gonna win the argument, and we all know that's a terrible way. I mean, like, it doesn't matter whether you're in a company or a relationship, but if you're out to win, nobody's winning. But if you're focused on the problem and how to solve it and adapt to that problem, I think that's really where you need to go.
I have heard it said, I wish I remember who said this, but, I've heard it said, and now I'll repeat it myself, that as soon as you win an argument, you've already lost. Because the other person does not necessarily think of you kindly for dominating and winning the argument, especially if it's not about coming to a solution that helps everybody. And you saying that makes me think of that and how, yeah, it's not about, hey, look at me, I had the best idea, or I won and my idea is going to be the one we implement. And so it's a little bit of a perspective shift too. I wonder, did people fall into that trap because they are in an environment where they feel like they need to prove themselves? And does that, like, get back to the trust issue too?
I think there's certainly elements that do. I think there's so many factors that play into it. Of course, ego is another. We all want to win. I mean, like, who doesn't want to win? Like, you sit there and, like, no, mine's the best. My idea is the best. But, to your point, like, there are other factors that play into it. I mean, ultimately, you can sit there and you can approach it as I must prove myself. And there's almost that bit of insecurity for sure at times where you must give the best idea because, "Oh my gosh, I need to prove that I'm value add here," versus sitting back and waiting for the right moment to add your 2 cents, and maybe it's right or maybe it's not. But I think also from a standpoint of insecurity, you have to be open. You have to be open to different ideas, and you have to be open to being wrong, and you have to be open to you don't know everything, and you're not the source of all knowledge and source of all things. When I work in teams, I just work with a client, and one of the things that I said is like, I want to talk to everybody that I'm talking to because I'm doing an assessment of your process, right? And I said, I want to talk to everybody because the people doing the work are going to have the best ideas on what are the problems. And they're going to have, they may not know how to fix all of them, but they're going to know what your biggest pain points are. And they're going to know what, you know, is the things that they struggle with the most and are causing them the most time. It's not the high level people that say, oh, this is costing me the most money. Sometimes you find that in those little things that just make a huge difference from a process standpoint and from a cost and resource standpoint. So you have to be open as a leader to be wrong, to hear other voices. And I think, we all suffer with some kind of insecurity. We all suffer with an ego. Different levels from different everyone's and everybody's experiences has altered who you are and what's important to you and what you can take and what you can't take. To do so, you have to be open and you have to be vulnerable.
It almost feels even harder as a leader to be vulnerable because you do have the pressure and the spotlight on you. I was talking about this with my management team and how all eyes are on you when you're a manager, when you're a leader, and people are looking to you. There is that pressure to be perfect. We're not going to be perfect though. We're going to make mistakes. And it's how you address that and you own that. You made a point in your story too that you had shared, Melissa, about the transition from simply managing to leading. And there's a nuance there. I've talked about it with a few guests, and they've all shared some really wonderful perspectives. I'm curious, what is your perspective on that shift? And do you need to always be a manager? Do you always need to be a leader? Is there a blend? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think in my life and in my viewpoint, everything is elements of moderation, right? Because you can't be a leader all the time. Sometimes you just have to, guys, we got to get this done. And part of that is being a leader by stepping in and helping. and being part of that. I think there's elements of every role that are part management and part leadership. And, leadership is lifting people up, it's strategizing, it's thinking big picture, it's building that culture. Managing is getting the tasks done and getting the work done and figuring that out. So, I don't think anything ever stands alone. And I think like, I don't think you can think of it as like you can only be a leader and you can only be a manager. I think that there are people that are only leaders. And I think there are people that are only managers, but I don't think it's effective.
Well, you make me you think too, sometimes we as leaders need to perhaps step back and let other people lead so that they get the practice and the growth too. So you're right. I mean, there are definitely certain types and styles of leadership. And if we kind of segment ourselves to one style or one role, then we're missing out on nuanced in our own positions, but then we're also not considering perhaps the needs and the dynamic of the people we're around as
Yeah,
well.
I would agree. Yeah. And ultimately from being part of being a true leader is developing others, is empowering others, is allowing people to step up into those roles. If you just sit there at the top, let's say you're a president of a company and you never allow anybody else to make another decision. You are only authoritative. You only like that is not going to make the best company. It's not going to make the best decisions. And also, you're not gonna build that trust and you're not gonna build that, relationship with your team that they are gonna wanna come to you because they never get anywhere, right? So, I don't think you can truly be just one thing. And the reality of people is everybody's different. Like, we wanna treat each other equally, but you can't treat each other all the same because it doesn't work for everybody. Somebody I can sit down and be like, okay, look, you made a mistake yesterday. Let's talk it through and, just fix it. Right. You can have that simple, quick conversation because you've built enough there. And other people, you have to be like, okay, let's talk about this and let's think about this. And okay, what do you think you should do differently? And you have to get a little bit more soft in your approach. And, I'm the person that's like, just give it to me straight. I don't need the fluff. But I've definitely have people that I'm like, they need more fluff. They need more fluff. And it's hard for me because, I didn't have as much fluff when I was younger. I've got more fluff in me now, but I still am very much, let's just get to the point.
Well, I'm so glad you bring that up too, because that's something that younger managers, leaders, and I say younger, I don't mean age, I mean in terms of the years or time and experience in that role that maybe they struggle with. And I've seen that too and experienced it myself where you have to figure out how is this going to be received and how do I need to deliver difficult conversations or feedback or even even training and development. How do we help this person? Because to your point, everyone is different. And I've even had conversations with managers where it's like, hey, look, we have to understand how your team is going to receive your the way that you're communicating with them because the way you and I communicate is maybe different. Maybe you can take some of this feedback. They might not be able to take this feedback. You might appreciate directness, but do they appreciate receiving feedback directly? How is that going to come across to them? And digging in a little bit deeper to the nuances there. So I'm glad you mentioned that because it's not a cut and dry cookie cutter apply, this practice, this approach for everyone. We have to really get to know our team and know the dynamic for the individual and the group, right?
Yeah. Well, and I would also add, like, as managers and leaders, sometimes these conversations are difficult for us too, right? We get in those mode early in our career. It's either you be really straight or you're conflict avoidance and you're going, oh my God, I'm dreading that conversation. I don't want to have it. They're going to react badly. Then you do have it and they do react badly. And it's tough. And so you get into this mode of this, cyclical structure of like you dread it, it goes badly, you dread it, it goes badly. And you have to shift. And so, earlier in my career, I definitely struggled with that a lot. And it was that cyclical structure. But later in my career, it became easier. Why? Because like I built this relationship with people and I built this trust. And so when things started going off the rails, I did it immediately. And so I never built to that point. And yes, I would still have anxiety about like, oh gosh, how are they going to take it? But then they would take it well. And then that would do the reverse cyclical of, oh, I had a positive response. They've righted the ship. I've had a positive response. They've righted the ship. Oh, I can just say one thing now and it triggers them back to our conversation. They're like, oops, sorry, working on it, and then just move forward. So, like you also get that feedback loop where you're playing off who you're working with. And as leader, it is your responsibility, as much as we hate saying it, it is our responsibility to keep working on it and keep trying to make it better and not give up on that individual. Right. And sometimes it's really, really hard.
Agreed. You're making me think of, I think it's Brené Brown who talks about, the rumble, and sometimes you have to have a rumble. It's like the idea that the difficult conversation will get you to what you're talking about, the almost social capital, I think, is another terminology we could use to describe that equity that you're building with the person because you have a genuine connection and relationship to be able to have those difficult conversations. Yeah, it doesn't make it easy, right? But, I mean, and maybe it makes it easier to approach, but you've developed that enough that you can have the conversation, check in with each other, make sure you're good, and know that you're gonna still have a relationship moving forward. And I've experienced when you don't have the relationship with that person and you do have to deliver difficult conversation, then navigating that can be a little rocky, um, and kinda sounds similar to what you're describing too.
Yeah, absolutely. I've definitely had those ones where that relationship wasn't there. And some of it is like early in my career, I had a bunch of people that um, didn't have the best work ethic. And when you have somebody that you're trying to bring up who doesn't have the best work ethic, it's extra hard. And so they just, like it's a lot of friction. It's a lot of friction. And I will still admit to this day, I don't know how I could have handled that better just because it was a lot of friction. And how do you get somebody who doesn't have a good work ethic to actually do their job? I don't know. But sometimes you just keep trying until that's it.
It is that kinda gray area of knowing, okay, it's not about giving up, but it's about, at least for me personally, knowing when you need to let go and that you have the confidence that you have given as much support and resource as possible, and it might not be a good fit for that person, and the best thing you can do for that person is to let them go off in the direction that they're really meant to go in. Otherwise, you're gonna keep that friction going, and it's gonna cause problems for the larger group or the larger team, and that's not a cookie cutter that's not cut and dry for anyone either. There's still exceptions and different variables there, but, I've definitely experienced that and had to learn and still learn, right? We're learning and growing. But Melissa, this has been wonderful. I think I've kept you even too long, but
That's fine.
you indulge me. What if you were to give one piece of advice to anyone in their leadership journey, their management journey, something that you would want them to take away and either learn as a lesson or study or, be open to, what would you share with them?
Yeah, I mean, it's two prongs. One, it's always about trust. Everything's about trust. You'll never do the best and you'll never get the best out of your team unless you can build that trust. And the second one is keep learning. You're not a finished product. Like you have to just keep growing and keep learning and knowing that you are not perfect, as you said, and you can always make a mistake. But if you acknowledge it and learn from it and move forward, that's the best thing you can do. But just keep learning.
I love it. Great advice for anyone at any stage. Thank you so much, Melissa. This has been a really treat.
You're very welcome.
It's definitely been a treat, I hope, for our audiences, but I want to make sure that they get a chance to connect with you, Melissa, and follow you, your great work, your great wisdom and insights, and maybe even work with you too. So, how can people best connect with you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me under my LinkedIn handle. So Melissa Rath. It's actually Melissa K. Rath because Melissa Rath was taken. Um, so, and that's the best place for everybody to follow and find me at this point. Otherwise, I have a website, and I'm sure Rebecca could put that in the comments or something like that.
Absolutely. I'll have all those links below. Thank you again, Melissa. And thank you, our great listeners, for joining us for Bad Bosses, Great Leaders podcast. We'll catch you on the next one.